I thought we were celebrating the joy of our first child, but little did I know, my wife was hiding a dark secret with our married neighbor, one that would tear apart two families and leave her utterly alone. My name's Ethan, I'm 37, and I've been married to my wife, Sarah, for 9 years. We've had our ups and downs, like any marriage, but I always thought we had a good thing going, until everything started falling apart right in front of me. To give you some context, we live in a nice suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knows each other. You see the same faces every morning, wave hello when you pass by, maybe stop to chat if you're not in a rush. It felt like a real community, where everyone looked out for one another. Our next-door neighbors, Chris and his wife Emily, were no exception. They've got 2 young kids, and we'd all hang out together from time to time. Barbecues, birthdays, or just a few beers in the backyard on a summer evening. You know, the typical suburban life. But over the past few months, things between Sarah and me started to change. It was nothing dramatic at first, just little things that felt off. She'd become distant, almost like she was somewhere else even when she was right next to me. I'd try to talk to her, and she'd give me these short, vague answers, like she wasn't really paying attention. And then there were the times when she'd get these messages on her phone, late at night, and she'd always tilt the screen away from me. If I asked who it was, she'd say it was just a friend from work, and then change the subject. I tried not to think too much of it. I mean, we've been together for almost a decade, and I trusted her. I figured she was just stressed from work, or maybe we'd hit a bit of a rough patch and needed to find our way back to each other. But the more I paid attention, the more I noticed things that didn't add up. She was going out more, saying she was meeting up with friends, but she'd never really tell me who she was with. And sometimes, I'd come home from work to find her already dressed up, makeup done, looking like she was ready for a night out when she hadn't mentioned any plans. I brushed off a lot of the signs, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, there was this nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I just didn't know how bad it was going to get, or how close to home the betrayal really was. A few weeks after I started noticing things were off with Sarah, something happened that made me forget all my doubts, at least for a while. One evening, Sarah came home with this huge smile on her face, and she told me she had some big news. I remember my heart racing as I tried to guess what it could be, but nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. "We're going to have a baby," she said, her eyes lighting up as she handed me a small, white envelope. I stood there, stunned for a moment, before opening it up to see the ultrasound picture inside. I can't even describe how I felt in that moment. It was like everything I had ever wanted was finally happening. I've always wanted to be a dad, and when I saw that little image on the paper, I felt like I was on top of the world. Sarah and I hugged, and for a few moments, it was like all the tension, all the doubts, just melted away. Whatever rough patch we'd been going through, it didn't seem to matter anymore. We were going to be parents, and I was over the moon. We spent the rest of the night talking about names, imagining what the baby would look like, and making plans for the future. I felt like we were reconnecting, like this news had brought us back together. It was exactly what I thought we needed. I wanted to share our excitement with everyone, so I decided to plan a barbecue for the upcoming Saturday. Nothing too fancy, just a backyard gathering with some friends, good food, and a chance to share the big news. And since it seemed like everyone was doing it these days, I figured we'd make it a gender reveal, too. We'd find out if we were having a boy or a girl, surrounded by the people we cared about. I invited Chris and Emily, our neighbors, of course. They'd always been close to us, and I figured they'd be just as excited about the news as we were. I made sure to call up a few other friends and family members, and before long, the plan was set. It was going to be a great day, a celebration of this new chapter in our lives, and I was determined to make it special. I spent the rest of the week prepping for the barbecue, picking out decorations, planning the menu, and making sure everything was perfect. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I felt like Sarah and I were heading into something beautiful together, and I couldn't wait to share it with everyone. But little did I know, the happiness I was feeling would be short-lived, and that Saturday would be the beginning of the end. The day of the barbecue finally arrived, and everything was set. The backyard was decorated, the grill was fired up, and there was this excited buzz in the air. Sarah had been running around, making sure everything looked perfect, and I could see how much effort she'd put into making the day special. It made me feel good, like we were truly in this together, like this baby was bringing us closer. Friends and family started trickling in, and before long, the backyard was filled with laughter, the smell of grilled burgers, and the clinking of glasses. I was on cloud 9, holding on to the secret of the gender reveal, watching as everyone mingled and enjoyed themselves. This was the moment I'd been looking forward to all week, and it felt even better than I'd imagined. As I was standing near the grill, Chris and Emily arrived with their 2 kids. I waved them over, a grin spreading across my face. "Hey! You made it!" I called out, genuinely happy to see them. Chris shook my hand, giving me a playful pat on the back, while Emily smiled and handed over a gift bag. "Congratulations, you two," Emily said, her voice warm. "We're so happy for you. Finally, a baby in the neighborhood. Our kids will have someone new to play with." She said it with this huge, genuine smile, and I could see she was already imagining future playdates, afternoons at the park, and the kind of easy camaraderie parents have when they live next door to each other. Her words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. For a second, I imagined it too, our baby running around with Chris and Emily's kids, growing up in this friendly, safe neighborhood, surrounded by people who cared about them. It made everything feel more real, more tangible. This wasn't just a baby, this was the beginning of a family, of memories we'd be making for years to come. Sarah walked over to join us, glowing with that same joy I'd seen on her face when she first told me she was pregnant. She hugged Emily, laughing as they talked about how our future little one would be part of the neighborhood kid gang. I felt my heart swell, and for a moment, I allowed myself to bask in the warmth of it all, the smiles, the congratulations, the sense of community. It was everything I'd ever wanted, and I was grateful to be standing there, surrounded by people who were genuinely happy for us. But somewhere deep down, there was that tiny, nagging feeling I hadn't been able to shake. The one that told me something wasn't quite right. I pushed it aside, determined to enjoy the day and not let anything ruin this moment. The kids ran around the yard, the adults sipped their drinks and chatted, and everything seemed perfect. Little did I know, the peace I was feeling was about to be shattered, and the truth that had been hidden would come out in a way I could never have predicted. A couple of weeks went by after the barbecue, and life was starting to settle into a new rhythm. Sarah was about 3 months into her pregnancy, and while we hadn't fully planned out everything yet, I was still riding that high of becoming a dad. It was like this bright, hopeful future was unfolding in front of me, and I wanted to hold on to it. But there was something else that was nagging at me, something that started to feel harder and harder to ignore. In the weeks since the party, Sarah had been spending a lot of time over at Chris and Emily's place. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, Emily had 2 kids, and it made sense that Sarah would want to get advice from her about what to expect, what to prepare for, and all that. But soon, it started to feel excessive. Sarah was going over there almost every day, and she'd always have an excuse ready. Emily's giving me some tips on parenting, or I'm helping out with their kids, getting some practice, or even, I just need to get out of the house for a bit. It didn't seem like a big deal at first, but then I realized that she was spending more time with the neighbors than she was at home. One evening, when she came back after yet another visit, I couldn't help but ask, "Sarah, why are you spending so much time over at Chris and Emily's? You're there almost every day." She looked at me, surprised by the question, but then quickly smiled. "Oh, Ethan, I'm just asking Emily for advice. She's been through this twice, and she knows a lot about what I should expect. I'm just getting ready for when the baby comes." She said it so casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world, and for a moment, I felt silly for even asking. But something about it still didn't sit right with me. I wasn't sure why, but it just felt off. The next day, I ran into Emily while I was out getting the mail. She was outside, playing with her kids, and I figured it wouldn't hurt to ask. Maybe Sarah was really helping out more than I realized. "Hey, Emily," I said, trying to sound casual. "I hope Sarah's not boring you. She's been spending a lot of time over at your place lately, and I just wanted to make sure she's not getting in the way." Emily looked at me, a bit confused, and then she smiled politely. "Oh, no, not at all. She's come over a couple of times, but she's never a bother. It's nice to have someone to chat with." I stood there, stunned, trying to process what she'd just said. A couple of times? That couldn't be right. Sarah had been telling me she was at their place almost every day, spending hours there. But Emily was acting like it was no big deal, like Sarah's visits had been occasional, at best. I managed to force a smile and thanked her before heading back inside, but my mind was racing. If Sarah wasn't at Emily's as often as she said she was, then where was she going? And why had she lied about it? I tried to tell myself there had to be a reasonable explanation, that maybe Emily just didn't remember or something. But that nagging feeling was back, stronger than ever, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to find out what was really going on, and I had a sinking feeling that whatever it was, I wasn't going to like it. That weekend, Sarah told me she was heading over to Chris and Emily's house again. By now, I'd gotten used to hearing it, but this time, there was this tightness in my chest that I couldn't ignore. Still, I played it cool. "Yeah, sure, go ahead," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, a casual smile on my face. "Have fun." She gave me a quick peck on the cheek and headed out, just like she always did, and I watched as she walked out the door, my mind already made up. I needed to know what was really going on, and today was the day I was going to find out. After she left, I waited for about 20 minutes, trying to keep myself from overthinking, from imagining all the worst possibilities. Then, I grabbed my keys and made my way over to Chris and Emily's house. As I walked down the street, my heart was pounding, my mind racing with questions. Was she really there to see Emily, or was something else going on? I had to know. When I got to their house, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar, which struck me as odd. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should knock, but then I decided to just go in. "Hello?" I called out, stepping into the hallway. "Anyone home?" The house was silent. No laughter, no conversation, no sound of kids running around. Just quiet. I walked further inside, glancing around, but there was no sign of anyone. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized how still everything was. I knew Sarah had come over here, she told me she was going to be here, but if that was true, then where was she? I moved through the house, peeking into the living room, the kitchen, but it was all empty. My heart was pounding, and I could feel that same, nagging dread starting to build, stronger than ever. Then, I heard a faint sound, muffled, but unmistakable. Laughter, followed by a low murmur, coming from somewhere further back. I headed towards the sound, slowly, quietly, until I reached the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. The curtains were drawn, but there was just enough of a gap for me to peek through. And when I did, I felt my entire world come crashing down around me. There they were, out in the open, not even bothering to hide. Chris was lying on a blanket spread out on the grass, and Sarah was on top of him, naked, her back arching as she moved. They were completely wrapped up in each other, lost in their own world, not a care in the world. I felt like I was in a nightmare, like I was watching something that couldn't possibly be real, but it was. It was real, and it was happening right there in front of me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My mind was screaming, telling me to turn away, to just leave, but I was frozen in place, my eyes locked on the scene unfolding before me. Every doubt, every suspicion I'd had over the past few weeks suddenly made sense, and the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. She hadn't been going over there to see Emily. She'd been going there to see Chris, and they'd been sneaking around behind my back, right under my nose. I don't know how long I stood there, watching, but it felt like an eternity. Every second felt like another knife twisting in my chest, another piece of my heart breaking. Eventually, I managed to pull myself away, my hands trembling as I backed away from the door. I had seen enough. More than enough. When I stumbled back from Chris and Emily's house, my mind was a mess, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. But amid all that chaos, there was one thought that cut through the haze: I was going to make them pay. They thought they could betray me, lie to me, and keep this disgusting little secret hidden, but they were wrong. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I had filmed everything. As sick as it made me to stand there, watching Sarah and Chris together, I had the presence of mind to take out my phone and hit record. I didn't know what I was going to do with the footage at that moment, but something told me I'd need it. It was evidence, undeniable proof of their betrayal, and a tool that I could use to tear down everything they had built on their lies. When I got home, I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands still trembling as I played the video back. Every second of it made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to watch it, to face the truth head-on. This was the reality of my marriage now, and there was no more pretending, no more ignoring the signs. They had made their choices, and now I was going to make mine. I spent the next few hours planning, thinking through every detail of what I was going to do. I didn't want to just confront them, I wanted to destroy them. I wanted them to feel the same sense of betrayal, humiliation, and pain that I felt. And I wasn't going to let them off easy. I knew that confronting them in private would be too easy. They'd deny it, make excuses, try to weasel their way out of it. No, I needed to expose them, to rip the mask off in front of everyone who mattered to them. I started by making copies of the video, storing them in multiple places, just in case they somehow tried to get rid of it. I was going to make sure this video was seen, one way or another. But that wasn't all. I needed to make sure Chris couldn't hide behind his perfect little family life, pretending he was this devoted husband and father. So I gathered everything I could on him, texts, phone records, anything that showed he had been sneaking around behind Emily's back. If he was going to lose everything, he was going to lose it all at once. I knew Chris had a work event coming up, a community event he was helping organize, one where his boss, colleagues, and a lot of neighborhood families, including Emily and their kids, would be attending. It was the perfect setting, a place where he'd be surrounded by all the people who thought they knew who he was. I made sure to mark it on my calendar, and I started planning how I was going to use that night to my advantage. I put together a small, discreet website, just a simple page with the video and some of the other evidence I had collected. I didn't want to blast it out to the world just yet, I wanted to control when and where the truth would come out. I created a QR code that linked directly to the page and printed it out, along with a few other documents that I could use if I needed to back up what I was saying. I wasn't going to let Sarah get away with this either. She had been lying to my face, pretending to be the perfect wife while sneaking around behind my back. I knew she was still planning to see Chris, and I used that to set my own trap. The next time she told me she was going to Emily's for parenting advice, I pretended to go along with it, but instead, I stayed home and set up a few surprises. I took all the copies of the evidence and organized them neatly, with a letter explaining exactly what she had done and how I had found out. I didn't write anything angry or emotional, I just laid out the facts, in cold, clear terms, so there would be no way for her to twist it, no way for her to lie her way out of it. Then, I sent the same information to Emily, along with a note that said, "You deserve to know the truth about your husband." The night of the community event came, and I was ready. I went, not to confront them directly, but to make sure everything went according to plan. I watched as Chris mingled, laughed, and pretended to be this upstanding guy, knowing that his world was about to come crashing down around him. When the room was full, I quietly slipped the QR code into a few strategic places, on the tables, near the bar, anywhere people would be sure to notice them. I didn't need to do anything more. One by one, people began scanning the code, their faces going pale as they watched the video, saw the texts, and read through everything I had compiled. It didn't take long for the whispers to start, for people to begin glancing over at Chris, their expressions shifting from friendly to disgusted. I saw Emily, holding her phone, staring at the screen with wide eyes, and then looking over at her husband, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was chaos. Emily confronted Chris right there in the middle of the event, her voice shaking with anger as she demanded an explanation. People were filming, murmuring, their eyes fixed on him as he stumbled through a pathetic attempt to deny everything, but the damage was already done. He was exposed, and there was no going back. When I got home, I was already waiting for Sarah. She stormed in, her face red, her eyes wild with a mix of anger and desperation. "How could you do this?" she screamed, throwing her purse down. "You ruined everything." "No, Sarah," I said, my voice calm, cold. "You ruined everything. I just made sure everyone knew the truth." She tried to explain, to tell me it was a mistake, that she never meant for things to go this far, but I didn't care anymore. I had spent weeks, months, trying to make sense of what had happened, trying to understand how the woman I loved could do this to me, but I was done. I handed her the letter I had written, the one with all the evidence, and I watched as she read through it, her hands trembling, her face crumpling as she realized just how thoroughly she had been exposed. "You need to leave," I said, my voice steady. "Pack your things and get out. I'm filing for divorce, and I don't want to see you again." She broke down, begging, crying, saying she was sorry, but it was too late. I had seen enough, and I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed them, destroyed their lies, and now I was ready to move on, no matter how hard it was going to be. As I stood there, watching her gather her things, I felt a strange sense of peace. The pain was still there, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. I had taken control, and I had made sure that they would never be able to hurt me, or anyone else, the way they had. They thought they could play me, but in the end, they were the ones who lost everything. And as far as I was concerned, that was the best revenge I could have asked for. After I caught Sarah and Chris together, I knew there was no coming back from it. I filed for divorce as soon as I could, determined to cut ties and move on. But things were complicated. You see, Sarah was already pregnant, and that added a whole new layer of mess to everything. During the first few meetings with our lawyers, Sarah tried to play the sympathy card, claiming that we should stay together, for the sake of the baby. She kept saying that she loved me, that she wanted to make things work, and that we could get through this. But I was done listening to her lies. I had seen enough, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into staying. Things took a turn when I brought up the possibility of a DNA test. Given everything that had happened, I needed to know if the baby was really mine. It wasn't just about Sarah's betrayal anymore, I had to be sure. I wasn't going to spend the next 18 years raising a child that might not even be mine, especially when she'd been sneaking around with our neighbor. When I mentioned the DNA test, Sarah's whole demeanor changed. She got defensive, saying it was unnecessary, that I was just being paranoid, and that we should be focusing on fixing our marriage instead of trying to ruin things. But I wasn't backing down. I told her that if she wanted to prove she was telling the truth, then there shouldn't be a problem with a DNA test. She refused. Flat out refused. She said she didn't want to do it, that it was invasive and unnecessary, and that I just needed to trust her. That was when I knew she was trying to delay things, trying to keep me tied up in this mess for as long as possible. She thought that if she could stall, maybe I'd soften up, maybe I'd reconsider the divorce and we could just sweep everything under the rug. But I wasn't falling for it. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "If you refuse to do the DNA test now, then we'll let the court handle it. They'll order one if we can't settle this, and we'll get our answers in court. One way or another, the truth is coming out." The panic on her face was clear, but she still tried to act like she had everything under control. She said she needed time, that she wanted to prove she could be a good wife, that we could fix things for the sake of the baby. But I was done letting her dictate how things were going to go. I was ready to face whatever came next, even if that meant taking this fight to the courtroom. In the weeks that followed, Sarah kept trying to delay, making up excuses, saying she was too stressed to deal with the legal proceedings. She thought if she could drag things out, she could buy herself more time, but I wasn't playing along. Every time she stalled, I pushed harder, making it clear that I wasn't backing down. I filed an official request with the court for a DNA test, and the judge ordered it. Sarah had no choice but to comply. The court day came, and I could see how nervous she was. She kept glancing at me, like she was hoping I'd change my mind, hoping I'd cave in and call the whole thing off. But I didn't. We were going through with it, and I was going to get the answers I needed, no matter how hard she tried to hide from the truth. When the judge read the order aloud, Sarah finally broke. She admitted, right there in the courtroom, that she had been trying to avoid the DNA test because she wasn't sure if the baby was mine. She said she was confused, that she had made mistakes, but none of it mattered. The truth was out. She had been hoping to trap me into staying by making me think the baby was mine, but now everyone could see what she had been trying to do. The judge didn't take kindly to her games. He made it clear that the test was going to happen, and once the results came in, we'd proceed with the divorce. I felt a mix of relief and anger as I left the courthouse that day. Relief because the truth was finally coming out, and anger because of how far she had been willing to go to keep me trapped in her lies. A few days later, the DNA test results arrived, and they confirmed what I had feared. The baby wasn't mine. Sarah had been carrying Chris's child, and she had been trying to pass it off as mine to keep me around. It was like a final, brutal twist of the knife, but at least now I knew. At least now I had the truth. The divorce was finalized shortly after that, and I made sure she got as little as possible. She thought she could manipulate me, lie to me, and trap me, but in the end, she was left with nothing. She was going to have to raise Chris's child on her own, and I was finally free to move on. It wasn't the ending I had hoped for when we found out she was pregnant, but it was the one that brought me the closure I needed. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I knew I had made the right decision. It hurt, but at least I wasn't living in a lie anymore. I could finally start to heal, and that was worth everything. The day Sarah came to pack her things was surreal. I had been waiting for it, dreading it, but also looking forward to finally closing this painful chapter of my life. I stayed out of her way, watching from the corner of the living room as she moved through the house, grabbing her clothes, her toiletries, and whatever else she felt she needed. She was silent, her face blank, as if she was trying to hold herself together, but I didn't feel any sympathy for her. Not after everything she had done. When she finally finished, she dragged her suitcases to the front door, and for a moment, she just stood there, looking back at the house. I wondered if she was expecting me to say something, to try to convince her to stay, but I didn't. She had made her bed, and now she was going to lie in it. She stepped outside, and I watched through the window as she wheeled her suitcases across the street, heading straight for Chris and Emily's house. I had assumed this was her plan all along: move in with Chris, raise their child together, and pretend like this whole mess had never happened. I was bitter, but I figured at least now I could finally be done with her. But then, something unexpected happened. She got to the front door, and instead of knocking, she just stood there, staring at it. I could see her confusion, the way she looked around, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The house was dark, the windows bare, and there was no car in the driveway. Chris and Emily's home, which had always been lively, was now completely empty. Sarah hesitated for a moment, and then she pulled out her phone, frantically dialing a number. I watched as she paced back and forth, waiting for someone to pick up, but no one did. She called again, and again, her movements becoming more frantic, her eyes darting around as if hoping Chris would suddenly appear and let her in. But there was no one there. The house was vacant, the driveway empty, and the neighborhood completely still. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Had Chris and Emily moved? I hadn't heard anything about it, but it was clear that they were gone, and they hadn't told Sarah. I felt this strange mix of satisfaction and pity as I watched her standing there, completely lost, her perfect plan crumbling right in front of her. She kept trying to call, but it was clear she wasn't getting through. She knocked on the door a few times, even tried the handle, but it was locked. Finally, she just stood there, staring at her phone, as if waiting for it to magically ring. When nothing happened, she looked around, her eyes wide with disbelief, and I could see the panic starting to set in. After what felt like forever, she gave up. She pulled out another app, probably for a rideshare, and ordered a car. I watched as she waited, shivering slightly in the cold, until a few minutes later, a car pulled up and she climbed inside, taking one last, desperate look at Chris's empty house before the car drove off. I stood there, still processing what I had just seen. Chris had bailed. He must have known everything was going to come crashing down, and instead of sticking around to deal with the mess he had created, he took off. It was almost poetic, in a way. Sarah had thrown away our marriage for him, convinced he was her way out, and now he had left her high and dry, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I didn't know where she was headed, and to be honest, I didn't care. She had thought she could rely on Chris, that they could just run off together and start a new life, but she had underestimated just how shallow and selfish he was. He didn't want a future with her, he just wanted the thrill, the affair, and as soon as it got complicated, he bailed. Watching that car drive off, I felt a strange sense of closure. For the first time, I didn't feel angry or hurt. I just felt relieved. Sarah's plans had fallen apart, and she was finally facing the consequences of her actions. She thought she could manipulate me, lie to me, and then run off with Chris to play happy family, but now she was left standing in the cold, with nothing but her own mistakes to keep her company. It was over. Truly, finally over. I could close the door on this nightmare and start figuring out how to live my life again, without the lies, without the betrayals, and without Sarah. She was out of my life for good, and there was no part of me that regretted it. In the weeks after Sarah packed her things and left, I slowly started piecing my life back together. The divorce was finalized, and I was ready to move on. I didn't hear much about her after she tried to move in with Chris and found the house empty, but a few days later, I found out what had really happened with the neighbors. Chris and Emily had moved to another state. Apparently, after everything came out, they decided it was best to get a fresh start somewhere far from all the gossip, where they could try to rebuild their family without everyone knowing about Chris's affair. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, Emily had found out about the whole mess between Chris and Sarah, and for a while, their marriage had been on the brink of collapse. But then, something changed. Emily was pregnant. She was expecting their third child, and despite everything, she had decided to give Chris another chance. They didn't want to break up their family, especially with another baby on the way. So, Chris had been doing everything he could to prove that he was sorry, that he could change, and that he was committed to being a good husband and father. He had become a model husband, by all accounts, helping out more around the house, attending counseling, and begging Emily for forgiveness. I had to admit, part of me was surprised she decided to stay with him. I couldn't understand how she could forgive him after what he did, but I guess when you have kids, you start thinking about things differently. Maybe she believed he could change, or maybe she just didn't want to tear their family apart. Either way, Chris had been given another chance, and he was making the most of it. But the part that stuck with me the most was how different his situation was from Sarah's. When she found out that Chris had left with his wife to start a new life somewhere else, it must have felt like the ultimate betrayal. She thought she was his escape, his way out of the marriage, but he chose to stay and fight for his family. Sarah was left alone, while Chris was out there, trying to rebuild what he had almost destroyed. It must have crushed her, knowing that he would fight for Emily and their kids, but had no intention of doing the same for her. He didn't want to be with Sarah, and he definitely didn't want to raise the child she was carrying. She had gambled everything on him choosing her, and she lost. I could only imagine how that realization hit her. She must have felt abandoned, confused, and completely alone. All her plans had fallen apart, and now she was left with nothing but the consequences of her actions. She thought Chris would be her future, but in the end, he chose his wife and his kids over her, and she was just another painful reminder of the mistake he made. As for me, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The weight of all the lies, the betrayal, and the heartache was starting to lift, and I was beginning to see a new future for myself. I started going out more, reconnecting with old friends, and slowly but surely, I began to find a sense of peace. It wasn't easy, and there were days when everything still hurt, but I was moving forward. I even started seeing someone new, a woman I'd met through a friend. It was early, and we were taking things slow, but it felt good to be with someone who was honest, someone I could actually trust. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I wasn't sure where things would go, but I was willing to find out, and that was more than I could have said a few months ago. It's strange how life works out sometimes. I thought I had everything figured out, and then everything fell apart. But now, after all the chaos, I'm finally finding my way again. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready to face it, and I'm done looking back. As for Sarah, I have no idea where she ended up, and honestly, I don't care. She made her choices, and now she's living with them. I doubt Chris ever gave her a second thought after he left, and maybe that's the saddest part of all. She threw away our marriage, believing she was trading up, but in the end, she was just left standing there, alone, with nothing but regret. Life doesn't always give you the happy ending you expect, but sometimes, you end up with something better. I may not have the perfect storybook life I once thought I would, but I'm happy, and I'm moving on. That's all I need, and that's enough for me.